I sit beside my 8-year-old daughter Emma's hospital bed, watching the ventilator's rhythmic rise and fall. She's been unconscious for 3 days after a severe asthma attack turned into respiratory failure. My phone buzzes. A text from my mother. Bring dessert for Stephanie's gender reveal tonight. Don't be useless like always. I stare at the message, then at Emma's pale face surrounded by tubes and monitors. I type back. I'm at the hospital. Emma's on a ventilator. The reply comes instantly. Priorities. Show up or stay out of our lives forever. The fluorescent lights above Emma's bed never stop humming. It's been 72 hours since that terrifying Thursday evening when everything changed. I'd picked Emma up from her mother Jessica's house for my week of custody, and she seemed fine during dinner. We watched a movie together, and she went to bed around 8:30, but at 2 in the morning, I woke up to the sound of her struggling to breathe. Her inhaler wasn't helping. Nothing was helping. I'd never seen her lips turn that shade of blue before. The ambulance ride to Children's Medical Center felt like it lasted forever, even though the EMT told me it was only 12 minutes. Emma lost consciousness just as we pulled into the emergency bay. Dr. Patricia Williams, the pediatric pulmonologist, explained Emma's condition in words that still echo in my mind. Severe bronchospasm, respiratory failure, possible long-term lung damage if we don't get the inflammation under control. They had to intubate her immediately and put her on the ventilator to give her lungs time to heal. The next 48 to 72 hours are critical, Dr. Williams had said, her kind eyes showing both professional competence and genuine concern. Children with Emma's severity of asthma can recover fully, but it requires careful monitoring and absolute rest for her respiratory system. I haven't left this room since. My supervisor at Peterson Electric understood when I called in for emergency leave. Frank's been in the trade for 30 years, and he knows what it means when someone says their kid is in intensive care. Take all the time you need, Monroe, he'd said. The crew's got everything covered. But my family? They had a different perspective entirely. My mother's text wasn't the first one. She'd been messaging me since Friday about Stephanie's gender reveal party. My younger sister, the golden child who could do no wrong, was finally announcing whether she and her husband Derek were having a boy or girl. This was apparently the social event of the season in my mother's world. You promised you'd bring the chocolate cake from Morrison's bakery, she'd texted Friday morning. I'd made that promise 3 weeks ago, before my world turned upside down. Stephanie specifically requested it because you always pick the good desserts. I'd tried to explain about Emma's emergency, but my mother's responses grew increasingly irritated. She's had asthma attacks before, Monroe. You're being overly dramatic. One night in the hospital doesn't mean you abandon family commitments. That's when I realized something that should have been obvious years ago. My mother had never actually taken Emma's medical condition seriously. To her, asthma was just another inconvenience, another way for me to make excuses or seek attention. The pattern had been there all along, and I'd been too busy trying to please everyone to notice it. Stephanie called me directly on Saturday morning. Monroe, what's this nonsense about missing my party? Mom says you're trying to get out of your obligations again. My daughter is on a ventilator, Stephanie. She can't breathe on her own right now. Come on, you're exaggerating. Kids bounce back from these things. Derek's sister's son had pneumonia last month, and she still made it to our engagement celebration. You just need to prioritize better. The conversation ended when I hung up on her, but the damage was already spreading through our family network. Cousins, aunts, uncles. Everyone was getting a version of the story where Monroe was being difficult and letting everyone down during an important family milestone. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from relatives questioning my commitment to family values. Uncle Paul texted, "Your sister only gets one first gender reveal, Monroe. Emma will understand when she's older that sometimes we have to make sacrifices for special occasions." That's when Dr. Williams noticed my distress during her evening rounds. "Mr. Garrett, you've been here for 3 straight days. When's the last time you ate a real meal or changed clothes?" I looked down at the same work shirt and jeans I'd been wearing since Thursday night. "I can't leave her, doctor. What if something happens while I'm gone? The nurses will call you immediately if there's any change. You're no good to Emma if you collapse from exhaustion. At least go to the cafeteria for 20 minutes. But I couldn't bring myself to leave. Every breath Emma took was assisted by that machine. Every heartbeat was monitored on screens that beeped and flashed around the clock. How could I walk away for cake and party games when my daughter was fighting for her life? That's when Jessica arrived. I hadn't expected my ex-wife to show up. We'd been divorced for 2 years, and our communication usually stayed limited to pick-up and drop-off logistics. But there she was on Saturday evening, marching into the intensive care unit like she owned the place. "Monroe, we need to talk," she announced, not even glancing at Emma first. "I've been thinking about this situation, and I'm not comfortable with how you've been handling things." "How I've been handling things?" "Jessica. I brought her to the hospital the second she couldn't breathe. What exactly should I have done differently? You should have been monitoring her condition better in the first place. You should have noticed the signs earlier. Emma told me her inhaler wasn't working as well lately, but did you follow up with her doctor? Did you make sure she was taking her preventive medication consistently?" The accusation hit like a physical blow. Emma's inhaler prescriptions were always filled on time. I'd been the one driving her to every pulmonologist appointment since the divorce. I'd been the one learning proper inhaler technique and teaching her how to recognize her early warning signs. "Jessica, you know that's not fair. I've been managing her asthma perfectly well." "Have you?" "Because Dr. Williams told me that Emma's inflammation levels suggest this has been building for weeks." "Where were you when that was happening?" I stared at my ex-wife, trying to process what was happening. "Are you seriously trying to blame me for Emma getting sick?" "I'm saying that maybe it's time to reconsider our custody arrangement. Emma needs stability. She needs a parent who can focus completely on her health needs without getting distracted by work schedules and weekend plans." The threat was unmistakable. Jessica was talking about filing for full custody. She was using Emma's medical emergency as ammunition against me. And the worst part? She was probably coordinating this attack with my mother, who'd been telling everyone that I was abandoning family and making poor choices. I felt completely alone in that sterile hospital room, surrounded by the sounds of life support equipment and the smell of antiseptic. My daughter needed me more than she'd ever needed anyone, but instead of support from her extended family, I was facing a coordinated campaign to prove I was an unfit parent. That night, after Jessica left with vague threats about consulting her attorney, I made a decision. I blocked my mother's number. I wasn't going to let anyone guilt me into leaving Emma's bedside for a party. I wasn't going to apologize for putting my daughter's life above social obligations, but I had no idea what was coming next. Sunday morning brought a new level of family dysfunction I hadn't thought possible. Stephanie found a way around my blocking by calling from Derek's phone at 6:45 in the morning. Her voice was shrill with indignation when I answered. "Monroe Jacob Garrett, how dare you block Mom's number? How dare you embarrass our entire family like this?" I kept my voice low because Emma was still unconscious, and the nurses had emphasized that hearing was often the last sense to be affected. "Stephanie, my daughter is critically ill. I'm not discussing party planning right now. You're not discussing anything because you've decided to be completely selfish and self-absorbed. Do you have any idea how humiliated I was yesterday? Do you know what it felt like to have to explain to 35 people why my own brother couldn't be bothered to show up? I told you exactly where I was and why. You told me you were being overly dramatic about a routine asthma flare-up. Emma's fine, Monroe. She's probably just milking the attention because she knows you'll fall for it. Kids manipulate their parents all the time." The words hung in the air like poison. My 8-year-old daughter, lying motionless with a tube down her throat, was apparently manipulating me for attention. According to my sister, the ventilator keeping Emma alive was all part of some elaborate childhood scheme. "Stephanie, I'm hanging up now." "Wait, before you do, you should know that I've been talking to family members about this pattern of behavior. This isn't the first time you've used Emma as an excuse to avoid family responsibilities. Remember Christmas 2 years ago when you left early because she had a stomach ache? Remember 4th of July when you couldn't stay for fireworks because of her bedtime routine?" I remembered both occasions clearly. At Christmas, Emma had been running a fever of 102 degrees. At the 4th of July gathering, she'd been overwhelmed by the crowd and noise, and I'd recognized the signs of an approaching anxiety attack that could trigger her asthma. Those weren't excuses, Stephanie. Those were parenting decisions. Those were you putting a child's temporary discomfort above family unity. And now you're doing it again, except this time you're hiding behind a medical emergency to justify your antisocial behavior. What shocked me wasn't just the cruelty of her words, but the calculation behind them. Stephanie had clearly been building a case against my parenting for months, maybe years. Every time I'd prioritized Emma's needs over family social events, she'd been keeping score. "Derek and I have been discussing this situation," she continued, "and we think you might benefit from some professional guidance about establishing appropriate boundaries with Emma. It's not healthy for a child to have that much control over a parent's social life." Derek was a junior partner at a mid-sized law firm downtown. The implication was clear. They were considering legal intervention if I didn't start conforming to their expectations of family participation. "My boundary is keeping my daughter alive, Stephanie. I'm sorry if that interferes with your party planning. Your boundary is using a sick child to manipulate everyone around you into accommodating your social anxiety and need for attention. But it's not going to work anymore, Monroe. The family has talked, and we're not enabling this behavior." She hung up before I could respond. An hour later, I discovered what the family has talked actually meant. Stephanie had posted a series of social media updates about her gender reveal party that painted a picture of family betrayal and abandonment. The photos showed a beautiful backyard decorated in pink and blue, dozens of smiling relatives, and an elaborate cake from Morrison's bakery that someone else had apparently provided. The captions told a different story. "When family members choose drama over love, the rest of us just love each other harder." And, "So grateful for the relatives who show up when it matters, and learning to let go of those who always find excuses." The comments section was filled with supportive messages from aunts, cousins, and family friends, all expressing sympathy for Stephanie having to deal with difficult and unreliable family members. Nobody mentioned that the difficult family member was currently in a pediatric intensive care unit watching his daughter fight for her life. But the social media campaign was just the beginning. Around noon, I started receiving calls from extended family members who'd been at the party. Aunt Linda, my mother's sister, called to check on Emma but spent most of the conversation explaining how hurt Stephanie had been by my absence. "I know you love Emma, sweetie, but sometimes we have to trust that children are more resilient than we think. Stephanie only gets one first pregnancy, and family support during these milestones really matters." Cousin Marcus called an hour later with a similar message disguised as concern. "Hey man, I heard Emma's having some breathing problems. That's rough. But you know, stress affects kids too. And maybe she'd recover faster if she wasn't picking up on your anxiety about leaving the hospital." The worst call came from my mother's younger brother, Uncle Paul, who'd apparently been designated as the family spokesperson. "Monroe, we need to have a serious conversation about your priorities. Your mother is heartbroken about this situation. Stephanie is questioning whether she can count on you for anything important. And frankly, some of us are wondering if you're using Emma's medical issues to avoid dealing with your social obligations. Uncle Paul, Emma is on a ventilator. She can't breathe without machine assistance. This isn't a social obligation conflict." That's exactly the kind of dramatic language that makes everyone worry about your judgment. Kids get sick, Monroe. They go to the hospital. But life doesn't stop for the rest of us. Your grandmother survived raising 5 children without canceling family events every time someone had a fever. The comparison was absurd. My grandmother had raised children in an era when childhood asthma was poorly understood and often untreated. Some of those children hadn't survived their respiratory illnesses. But Uncle Paul wasn't interested in medical realities. He was interested in family conformity. "We've decided that you need some space to think about your priorities," he continued. "Until you're ready to apologize to your mother and sister, and until you're ready to participate in family events without using Emma as an excuse, we think it's best if you handle your problems independently." Translation: the family was cutting me off financially and emotionally unless I abandoned my daughter's bedside to attend social functions. That afternoon, Dr. Williams stopped by during her rounds and noticed my obvious distress. "Mr. Garrett, you look like you haven't slept in days. How are you holding up?" "I'm fine, doctor. How's Emma doing?" "Emma's holding steady, but I'm concerned about you. Are you getting any support from family members? Going through this alone can be overwhelming." I almost laughed at the irony. My family thinks I'm being overdramatic about Emma's condition. They think she's manipulating me for attention. Dr. Williams frowned. "Mr. Garrett, your daughter has been on mechanical ventilation for 3 days. There's nothing manipulative about respiratory failure. Has anyone in your family spoken with me or the nursing staff about Emma's medical status? No, doctor. They're too busy planning parties. I see. Well, for what it's worth, you're doing exactly what a good parent should do. Emma needs your presence more than she needs anything else right now. Children in intensive care recover faster when they have consistent, loving support. But even Dr. Williams' reassurance couldn't ease the growing sense of isolation. My family had made their position clear. Emma's medical emergency was less important than Stephanie's social event. My devotion to my daughter was selfish manipulation rather than responsible parenting. As Sunday evening approached, I realized I was facing this crisis with no support system whatsoever. Emma's mother was building a case against my custody rights. My birth family was treating her hospitalization as an inconvenience that proved my unfitness as a family member. I had no idea that the worst betrayal was still coming. Monday brought the first signs of hope I'd seen since Thursday night. Emma's oxygen saturation levels were improving, and Dr. Williams cautiously mentioned the possibility of reducing ventilator support if the trend continued. Her small hand moved when I spoke to her, and her eyelids fluttered in a way that suggested she might be approaching consciousness. I hadn't slept more than 2 hours in 4 days. The hospital chair beside Emma's bed had become my entire world. The cafeteria coffee was keeping me functional, but barely. Vending machine sandwiches and energy bars were sustaining me nutritionally, though I'd lost my appetite completely. The nursing staff had started expressing concern about my condition. Sarah, the night shift nurse who'd been particularly kind, brought me a pillow and blanket Sunday night. "Mr. Garrett, you need to take care of yourself too. Emma's going to need you to be strong when she wakes up." But I couldn't bring myself to leave, even for short breaks. Every machine alarm, every change in the monitors, every adjustment the nurses made felt like a potential crisis. What if Emma needed me and I wasn't there? What if something happened during the few minutes I was away? That's when my grandfather called. Grandfather Harold was my mother's father, a retired carpenter who'd always been the steady, reasonable voice in our family chaos. At 82, he still lived independently in his small house across town, maintaining his garden and woodworking shop with methodical precision. "Monroe, I just heard about Emma being in the hospital. How is she, son?" The relief in hearing someone ask about Emma's condition without immediately shifting to family politics was overwhelming. "She's on a ventilator, Grandpa. Respiratory failure from a severe asthma attack, but the doctors think she might be improving." "Good Lord. Why didn't anyone tell me how serious this was? Your mother said Emma was having one of her episodes and that you were making a big fuss about routine medical care." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "Grandpa, Emma's been unconscious for 4 days. She can't breathe without mechanical assistance. There's nothing routine about this." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Monroe, I think there's been some serious miscommunication in this family. Your mother told everyone at Stephanie's party that Emma had a minor asthma flare-up and that you were using it as an excuse to avoid family obligations. She said you were keeping Emma home from school to get sympathy and attention. Emma's been in intensive care since Thursday night. She hasn't been home at all." "That's not the story we heard. According to your mother, you've been playing up Emma's medical issues for dramatic effect and teaching her to use illness as manipulation." I realized my mother had been deliberately misrepresenting Emma's condition to the entire extended family. She'd convinced everyone that I was the problem, that Emma was fine, and that I was using a fake medical emergency to avoid social responsibilities. "Grandpa, would you like to speak with Emma's doctor? Dr. Williams can explain exactly how serious this situation has been." "I'd appreciate that, son. And Monroe? I'm coming to the hospital today. If my great-granddaughter is fighting for her life, I want to be there." Grandfather Harold arrived around 3 in the afternoon, bringing with him the smell of pipe tobacco and wood shavings that had defined my childhood visits to his workshop. He took one look at Emma, surrounded by medical equipment, and sat down heavily in the extra chair. "Oh, sweetheart," he whispered, reaching out to gently touch Emma's forehead. "I had no idea." Dr. Williams spent 20 minutes explaining Emma's condition, treatment plan, and prognosis to my grandfather. His face grew increasingly grave as he learned the details that my mother had concealed or misrepresented to the family. "Doctor, is Monroe doing everything right? Is he helping Emma's recovery by staying here?" Mr. Garrett is doing exactly what Emma needs, Dr. Williams assured him. Parental presence is one of the most important factors in pediatric recovery. Children heal faster when they know their parents are nearby. After Dr. Williams left, my grandfather sat quietly for several minutes, watching Emma's chest rise and fall with mechanical precision. "Monroe, I need to tell you something that's been bothering me. Your mother has been acting strangely about money lately. She's been asking me for help with household expenses, saying you've been borrowing from her and not paying her back. She's also mentioned that Emma's medical bills are putting strain on the whole family's finances. I hadn't borrowed money from my mother in over 3 years, and Emma's medical expenses were covered by my insurance through Peterson Electric. My mother had been creating fictional financial problems to justify her resentment about my parenting choices. Grandpa, I haven't borrowed any money from Mom, and Emma's medical care is covered. I figured as much. Your mother's been telling a lot of stories lately that don't add up. I'm starting to wonder if she's been using family situations to manipulate my help with her own money problems." We talked for another hour about family dynamics I'd never fully understood. My grandfather revealed that my mother had been positioning herself as the victim of everyone else's poor choices for years, collecting sympathy and financial support by misrepresenting various situations. Around 6 in the evening, I told my grandfather I needed to call my supervisor and update him on my leave status. Frank had been understanding, but I needed to provide a realistic timeline for my return to work. "Go ahead, son. I'll sit with Emma while you make your calls." I stepped out to the family consultation room down the hall and spent 10 minutes on the phone with Frank, explaining Emma's condition and getting approval for extended family leave. When I returned to Emma's room, my grandfather looked troubled. "Monroe, something happened while you were gone. The nurse mentioned that an older woman came to visit Emma during evening visiting hours yesterday. She was logged in as a grandmother, but she wasn't me, and she wasn't Jessica's mother. Did your mother come here?" My blood went cold. "When? Yesterday?" "Yesterday evening, around 7:30. The nurse said the woman spent about 20 minutes in Emma's room and left when visiting hours ended. I found Sarah, the night nurse who'd been working Sunday evening. Sarah, can you tell me about the woman who visited Emma yesterday?" "Oh, yes. An older lady, maybe 65, short gray hair, very well dressed. She said she was Emma's grandmother and that you'd given permission for her to visit. She seemed to know a lot about Emma's condition, so I assumed you'd spoken with her. Did she say anything to Emma? Did she try to wake her up?" I checked on them once, and she was talking to Emma very quietly. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but she seemed very focused on trying to get a response. I felt sick. My mother had come to the hospital while I was gone and spent 20 minutes alone with my unconscious daughter. She'd gained access by claiming I'd given permission, which I absolutely hadn't, and she'd been talking to Emma, trying to wake her up, for reasons I couldn't imagine but feared I was about to discover. "Sarah, is there any way to review security footage from yesterday evening? You'd need to speak with hospital security, but yes, all visitor areas are recorded." I spent the next hour with hospital security, reviewing footage that confirmed my worst suspicions. My mother had indeed visited Emma at 7:30 on Sunday evening, staying for exactly 23 minutes. The cameras showed her leaning over Emma's bed, speaking intently, occasionally touching Emma's hand and arm as if trying to provoke a response. What was most disturbing was my mother's body language. She wasn't acting like a concerned grandmother visiting a sick grandchild. She was acting like someone with an agenda, someone trying to accomplish something specific during her unauthorized visit. "Mr. Garrett," the security supervisor said, "given that this visitor wasn't authorized by you, we can restrict her access going forward if you'd like." "Yes, please. No one should be allowed to visit Emma without my explicit permission." I returned to Emma's room to find my grandfather reading quietly while Emma continued her steady, mechanical breathing. But something felt different. There was a tension in the air, and sense that something had changed while I was dealing with the security issue. "Monroe," my grandfather said quietly, "I think Emma might be waking up. Her eyes have been moving under her eyelids for the past few minutes." As if responding to his voice, Emma's eyes fluttered open for the first time in 4 days. Emma's eyes opened slowly, unfocused and confused in the bright hospital lighting. Dr. Williams had warned me that consciousness would return gradually, and that Emma might be disoriented from the medication and the trauma of intensive care. "Daddy?" Her voice was barely a whisper, hoarse from the breathing tube that had been removed just an hour earlier. "I'm right here, sweetheart. You're safe. You're in the hospital, but you're getting better." Emma's gaze moved around the room, taking in the monitors and medical equipment, before settling on my face. "Daddy, I was scared. I couldn't breathe, and everything went dark." "I know, baby. But the doctors helped you, and now your lungs are working better. You're going to be okay." My grandfather leaned forward gently. "Hello there, Emma. I'm your great-grandpa Harold. I've been waiting to meet you properly for a long time." Emma studied his face with the serious concentration that children use when processing new information. "Are you Daddy's grandpa?" "I am indeed. And I'm so proud of how brave you've been." Dr. Williams arrived for her evening rounds and was pleased to find Emma awake and responsive. After checking her vital signs and asking some basic orientation questions, she confirmed that Emma's recovery was progressing well. "Emma, you're doing much better. Your breathing is almost back to normal, and we might be able to move you out of intensive care tomorrow if you keep improving." But as the medical excitement settled and visiting hours ended, Emma grew quiet in a way that seemed different from normal post-hospital tiredness. She kept looking toward the door of her room, as if expecting someone to appear. "Daddy," she said finally, her voice still weak but carrying a weight that made me nervous. "What is it, sweetheart?" "Grandma came here last night." My grandfather and I exchanged glances. "What do you mean, Emma? Which grandma?" "Your mommy. Daddy's mommy came to see me when you weren't here." I felt my heart rate accelerate. "Emma, what did she say to you?" Emma looked uncertain, as if she was trying to decide whether she should tell me something that might upset me. "She said some things that made me sad." "What kind of things, baby? You can tell me anything. You're not in trouble." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "She said that you don't really want to take care of me anymore. She said you told her that having a sick little girl was too much work, and that you wanted to give me to mommy all the time so you could have fun without worrying about my asthma." The words hit me like a physical blow. My mother had used her unauthorized visit to poison my daughter's mind against me, while Emma was helpless and vulnerable in a hospital bed. "Emma, that's not true. Not any of it. I love taking care of you. I love having you with me. I would never, ever want to give you away." "But Grandma said you told her that. She said you complain about paying for my medicines and that real daddies don't let their daughters get this sick." I could barely control my rage. My mother had attacked the trust between me and my daughter at the moment when Emma was most frightened and vulnerable. She'd used Emma's medical emergency as an opportunity to create doubt about my love and commitment. "Emma, look at me. Have I left this room since you've been here?" "No, Daddy. You've been here the whole time. That's because there's nowhere else I want to be. There's nothing more important to me than making sure you're safe and loved. Grandma was wrong to say those things to you." But Emma wasn't finished. "Daddy," she said something else too. My grandfather reached over and took my hand, sensing that whatever was coming would be worse. "She said that Mommy and her found a new daddy for me. Someone with lots of money who can take better care of me. She said you were going to sign papers to let him adopt me because you're tired of being poor and taking care of sick kids." I felt the room spin around me. My mother hadn't just attacked my relationship with Emma. She'd revealed what sounded like an actual plan involving Jessica and a potential adoption. This wasn't random cruelty. This was part of a coordinated strategy to remove me from Emma's life entirely. "Emma, sweetheart, I will never sign papers to give you to anyone else. You are my daughter, and I will always be your daddy. No one can change that." "But what if the new daddy has more money for better doctors? What if I'd be healthier if I lived with him instead of you?" The manipulation was heartbreakingly effective. My mother had taken Emma's legitimate fear about her medical condition and twisted it into guilt about being a burden on me. She'd made an 8-year-old girl worry that her illness was ruining my life and that she'd be better off with strangers. "Emma, listen to me very carefully. You are not a burden. You are not too expensive. You are not too much work. You are the most important thing in my whole world, and I would rather be poor with you than rich without you." Dr. Williams chose that moment to return for a final check, and she immediately noticed the emotional tension in the room. "Is everything all right?" "Emma, you seem upset." I looked at my grandfather, who nodded encouragingly. "Doctor, Emma just told us that someone visited her yesterday and said some very disturbing things about her medical care and our family situation. Is it possible that emotional stress could affect her recovery? Dr. Williams sat down beside Emma's bed. Emma, sometimes when we're sick and scared, people might say things that worry us even more. But I want you to know that your daddy has been taking excellent care of you. He's done everything exactly right, and that's why you're getting better. Really? Really? Your daddy brought you to the hospital as soon as you couldn't breathe. He stayed with you every single day. He's been asking all the right questions about your treatment. That's what good daddies do when their little girls are sick. Emma looked relieved, but I could see that my mother's words had planted seeds of doubt that would take time to fully address. After Dr. Williams left, Emma fell asleep holding my hand. My grandfather and I sat in the darkened room, processing what we'd learned. Monroe, this is worse than I thought. Your mother didn't just make mistakes or misunderstand the situation. She deliberately used Emma's illness to try to destroy your relationship with her. Grandpa, she mentioned adoption papers and a new daddy with money. That sounds like she's been coordinating with Jessica about something specific. I think you need to do some investigating, son. Because if there's a legal plan in motion, you need to know about it before it's too late to defend yourself. I spent that night researching family law on my phone while Emma slept peacefully for the first time in 5 days. What I discovered made everything my mother had said to Emma even more sinister. In our state, parental rights could be terminated if a court determined that a parent was unable to provide adequate medical care for a child with special needs. If Jessica could prove that Emma's hospitalization was the result of my negligence, and if she could demonstrate that another person was better equipped to handle Emma's medical needs, she might actually be able to petition for my rights to be terminated in favor of a step-parent adoption. My mother's visit hadn't been random cruelty. It had been preparation for a custody battle that would position Emma's illness as evidence of my inadequacy as a father. But I was about to discover that the conspiracy went even deeper than I'd imagined. Tuesday morning brought more disturbing revelations than I could have anticipated. While Emma was sleeping peacefully for the first time since regaining consciousness, I decided to investigate the adoption papers she'd mentioned. Her words about a new daddy with lots of money felt too specific to be casual manipulation. I started by calling my friend Robert, who supervised the electrical crew at Peterson Electric. Robert had been through a nasty custody battle 3 years earlier and knew more about family law than I'd ever wanted to learn. Monroe, how's Emma doing? Frank told the whole crew about the situation. She's awake now and improving, but I need to ask you something strange. Has anyone called you asking questions about me? About my work performance or stability? There was a pause. Actually, yes. Last Friday, someone called, claiming to be from Child Services. They wanted to know about your attendance, your behavior, whether you seemed stressed or overwhelmed by single parenting. I told them you were one of the most reliable guys we had. My stomach dropped. What exactly did they ask? Weird stuff. Whether you talked about Emma's medical expenses being a financial burden, whether you ever mentioned feeling like you couldn't handle her health problems alone, whether you seemed to resent having custody responsibilities. Those were exactly the kinds of questions that would support a case for terminating parental rights based on inability to provide adequate care. Robert, that wasn't actually Child Services. I think someone's building a case against my custody rights. What do you need me to do? Can you document that call? Write down everything you remember about the questions and when it happened? I might need it for court. After hanging up with Robert, I called Jessica directly. I needed to know if my suspicions were correct. Monroe, I hope you're calling to discuss Emma's discharge planning. We need to talk about modifying our custody arrangement to ensure she gets proper medical supervision going forward. Jessica, has someone been helping you build a case against my parenting? I don't know what you mean. Has anyone been encouraging you to file for custody modification? Anyone been providing you with legal advice or support? Jessica's silence lasted too long. Monroe, I've been consulting with an attorney about Emma's best interests. That's my right as her mother. Which attorney? That's confidential. Is it Derek's law firm? Another telling pause. Derek mentioned that his firm sometimes handles family law cases, and they've offered to provide consultation services at a reduced rate. I felt the pieces falling into place. Stephanie's husband was providing legal services to help Jessica take Emma away from me. My mother was feeding them ammunition by misrepresenting my financial situation and parenting abilities, and they'd been coordinating this effort while Emma was fighting for her life. Jessica, who else have you been talking to about this custody modification? I don't have to answer your questions, Monroe. Have you been talking to my mother? Your mother called me Sunday morning to express concern about Emma's care. She mentioned that you've seemed overwhelmed by the medical responsibilities and that you've been borrowing money from family to cover expenses. Jessica, I haven't borrowed money from anyone. My insurance is covering Emma's medical care, and the reason I've seemed overwhelmed is because our daughter has been unconscious on a ventilator. Your mother says you've been exaggerating Emma's medical needs for attention and that you use her asthma as an excuse to avoid family obligations. I realized my mother had been working both sides of the situation. She'd been telling my family that I was overreacting to Emma's medical needs, while simultaneously telling Jessica that I was underreacting and providing inadequate care. Jessica, did my mother suggest that you file for custody modification? She mentioned that Emma might benefit from a more stable home environment with better resources for managing her medical needs. Better resources like what? Like a stepfather who's financially established and can provide private medical care instead of relying on emergency rooms. There it was. Jessica was already planning to remarry someone who could provide better medical resources for Emma, and my mother was encouraging her to frame my financial limitations as medical neglect. After ending the call with Jessica, I contacted the hospital's patient advocate to discuss my concerns about unauthorized visitors and potential interference with Emma's care. Mr. Garrett, unauthorized visitors can absolutely impact a child's recovery, especially if they're causing emotional distress. We can implement strict visitor restrictions that require your explicit approval for anyone to see Emma. I'd appreciate that. And is there any way to document the emotional impact of my mother's unauthorized visit? Dr. Williams can note in Emma's chart that she experienced distress related to inappropriate visitor behavior. That documentation can be important if there are custody concerns. But my investigation revealed even more disturbing details. I remembered my grandfather's concerns about my mother asking him for money to cover my supposed debts. When I called him Tuesday afternoon, his information filled in more pieces of the puzzle. Monroe, I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday. Your mother has asked me for over $3,000 in the past 6 months, claiming you were borrowing from her and not paying her back. Grandpa, I've never borrowed money from Mom. Where did she say that money was going? Emma's medical expenses, your rent when work was slow, car repairs when you couldn't afford them. She made it sound like you were constantly struggling and that she was enabling your irresponsibility by continuing to help. How much money has she borrowed from you total? Nearly $8,000 since last Christmas. She always promised to pay me back when you paid her back. I felt sick. My mother had been stealing money from her elderly father by claiming it was for my fictional financial emergencies. She'd created an entire narrative about my irresponsibility to justify what amounted to elder financial abuse. Grandpa, I need you to document all of those transactions. Dates, amounts, what she said the money was for. I think she's been committing financial fraud. Monroe, there's something else. Derek called me last month asking questions about your financial situation. He said he was trying to help the family understand how to support you better during difficult times. Derek had been gathering financial information to support Jessica's custody case while posing as a concerned family member. The coordination between my mother, sister, Jessica, and Derek was more extensive than I'd realized. That evening, while Emma was sleeping comfortably with much less medical support, I made a decision. I called Derek's law firm directly. I'd like to speak with Derek Patterson about a potential conflict of interest involving family law representation. Mr. Patterson is out of the office. Can someone else help you? This is regarding his representation of Jessica Martinez in a custody case, while also providing financial advice to my mother, Patricia Garrett, about the same family situation. There was a long pause. Sir, I'll need to have someone from our ethics department call you back. Within 2 hours, Derek's firm called to inform me that they were withdrawing from any representation of Jessica due to conflict of interest issues. Apparently, Derek's personal relationship with my family created ethical problems for representing someone in a case against a family member. But the damage was already done. Jessica had been encouraged to file for custody modification. My mother had been providing false information to support that case. and my family had been systematically undermining my reputation as a parent while Emma was fighting for her life. What I discovered next would prove that their betrayal was even more calculated than I'd imagined. Wednesday morning marked a turning point in more ways than one. Emma was alert, breathing independently, and scheduled to move out of intensive care to a regular pediatric room. But more importantly, I'd decided to stop being defensive and start fighting back against the coordinated attack on my parenting and my relationship with my daughter. My first call was to Linda Morrison, a family attorney Robert had recommended. Linda specialized in parental rights protection and had experience with parental alienation cases. Mr. Garrett, based on what you've described, this sounds like a textbook case of parental alienation combined with potential elder financial abuse. The good news is that most of their strategy depends on your passivity. If you're willing to be proactive, we can turn this situation around. What do you mean? Your mother's unauthorized hospital visit and her statements to Emma constitute interference with the parent-child relationship. Jessica's coordination with your family members to build a custody case could be seen as bad faith litigation. And if your grandfather is willing to document the financial fraud, your mother could face criminal charges. Linda explained that my first step should be gathering evidence and documentation before anyone realized I was building a legal response. Save every text message, every voicemail, every social media post. Get written statements from your work supervisor, Emma's doctor, and anyone who witnessed their behavior. Document the financial fraud with your grandfather's bank records. We need to build a comprehensive record before they have a chance to cover their tracks. I spent Wednesday afternoon collecting evidence with systematic determination. Robert provided a detailed written statement about the fake child services call, including the specific questions asked and his responses. Dr. Williams agreed to document Emma's emotional distress following my mother's unauthorized visit and her opinion that I'd provided excellent parental care throughout the medical emergency. The hospital security department provided official documentation of my mother's unauthorized visit, including timestamps and footage showing her accessing Emma's room under false pretenses. But the most important evidence came from my grandfather, Monroe. I went to the bank this morning and got copies of all the transactions your mother requested. I also found something else disturbing. He handed me a folder full of bank records and correspondence. Your mother has been using my account to make payments to Derek's law firm. Small amounts, but regular payments since last month. Grandpa, she's been paying Jessica's attorney with money she stole from you by claiming it was for my emergencies. That's exactly what happened. And look at this. He showed me a series of checks made out to a private investigator in Dallas. The payment memos said child custody research. Monroe, your mother hired a private investigator to dig up information about your personal life. She's been planning this custody attack for months. I felt a mix of rage and clarity. My mother hadn't been reacting emotionally to Emma's hospitalization. She'd been using it as an opportunity to advance a long-term plan to remove me from my daughter's life. Thursday morning brought the first sign that my fight back was working. Derek called me directly, bypassing Jessica entirely. Monroe, I think there's been some miscommunication about the family situation. I want you to know that my firm is no longer involved in any legal matters concerning Emma's custody. Why the sudden change, Derek? We've discovered some ethical conflicts that make it inappropriate for us to represent Jessica in this matter. Additionally, some of the information we were provided about your financial situation appears to have been inaccurate. You mean the information my mother provided was false? I can't discuss specifics, but I can tell you that our preliminary research didn't support the claims that were made about your economic instability or parenting adequacy. Derek's firm had done their own investigation and discovered that my mother's claims were fabricated. Rather than face potential ethical violations for participating in bad faith litigation, they were abandoning Jessica's case entirely. But my most important call was to Child Protective Services. I'd like to report suspected parental alienation and elder financial abuse, I told the intake worker. I have documentation of coordinated efforts to interfere with my parental rights and evidence of financial fraud against my elderly grandfather. CPS agreed to open an investigation based on my mother's unauthorized hospital visit and her statements to Emma. They were particularly concerned about the elder financial abuse, which often indicated broader patterns of manipulation and exploitation. Mr. Garrett, We'll be interviewing Emma about her grandmother's visit and assessing whether there's been psychological manipulation. We'll also be referring the financial abuse allegations to Adult Protective Services and potentially to law enforcement. Thursday afternoon, I took the most difficult but necessary step. I called my mother directly. "Patricia, this is Monroe. I'm calling to inform you that you're no longer welcome to have any contact with me or my daughter." "Monroe, don't be ridiculous. Emma is my granddaughter. Emma is my daughter, and you used her medical emergency to try to poison her against me. You told an unconscious child that I didn't want her and that I was planning to give her away for adoption. I was trying to help Emma understand the reality of her situation. The reality is that you've been stealing money from Grandpa Harold by lying about my financial needs. The reality is that you've been coordinating with Jessica to build a false custody case against me. The reality is that you've been manipulating everyone in this family for your own purposes." There was silence on the other end. "Patricia, CPS is investigating your unauthorized hospital visit and your statements to Emma. Adult Protective Services is investigating the financial abuse of Grandpa Harold, and I have documentation of everything you've done over the past week. You're making a mistake, Monroe. Family doesn't turn on family. You're right about that. Family doesn't turn on family, which is why what you did isn't family behavior." I hung up and immediately blocked her number again. But this time, I wasn't hiding from family pressure. I was protecting my daughter from documented psychological manipulation. Friday morning brought the most satisfying moment of the entire ordeal. Jessica called to discuss modifying our approach to custody discussions. "Monroe, I think we should consider mediation instead of litigation for any custody adjustments." "What changed your mind, Jessica?" "Derek's firm withdrew from the case, and my consultation with another attorney suggested that the evidence for modification might not be as strong as I initially thought." Translation: Jessica's new attorney had told her that my documentation would destroy her case and that she might actually lose custody time rather than gain it. "Jessica, let me be clear about something. Any future custody discussions will include documentation of your coordination with my family to build a false case against me. Any attorney you hire will receive copies of the evidence I've collected. And any attempt to interfere with my relationship with Emma will result in immediate legal action." "I think you're overreacting, Monroe. Emma was on a ventilator for 4 days, and instead of supporting her recovery, you used her medical emergency to try to take her away from me. That's not overreacting. That's protecting my daughter from people who would exploit her illness for personal gain." By Friday afternoon, Emma was medically cleared for discharge. Dr. Williams provided documentation that my care throughout the crisis had been exemplary and that Emma's recovery was excellent. "Mr. Garrett, Emma is lucky to have a father who prioritizes her well-being above social pressure. That kind of advocacy is exactly what children with chronic conditions need. But the most important vindication came from Emma herself. "Daddy, I know what Grandma said wasn't true. I know you love me and want to take care of me forever." "How do you know that, sweetheart?" "Because you stayed with me the whole time when I was scared, and because you got mad at the people who said mean things about us instead of getting mad at me for being sick." Emma had learned the most important lesson of all. True family protects each other from harm, even when that harm comes from people who are supposed to love you. The following Monday, Emma and I walked into family court for what would be the final resolution of Jessica's custody modification attempt. Armed with 6 inches of documentation, testimony from medical professionals, and evidence of the conspiracy against my parental rights, I felt confident for the first time since this ordeal began. Jessica's new attorney had tried to withdraw the custody petition entirely, but the court required a hearing since CPS had filed their own report about parental alienation concerns. Judge Patricia Henderson reviewed all the evidence methodically. Dr. Williams' testimony about my exemplary care during Emma's medical emergency, documentation of my mother's unauthorized hospital visit and psychological manipulation of Emma, proof of the financial fraud against my grandfather, and records of the coordinated legal strategy between Jessica and my family members. "Miss Martinez," Judge Henderson addressed Jessica, "the court finds that your custody modification petition was based on false information and was pursued in bad faith with assistance from the child's paternal family members. This represents serious interference with the father-child relationship." Jessica looked stunned as the judge continued. "Mr. Garrett, The evidence shows that you provided excellent care for Emma during a life-threatening medical emergency while facing harassment and manipulation from multiple family members. The court finds no basis for custody modification and significant concern about attempts to alienate Emma from your care. Judge Henderson's final ruling exceeded my most optimistic expectations. I was awarded primary physical custody of Emma, with Jessica relegated to supervised visitation for 6 months while she completed parenting classes focused on co-parenting communication and child-focused decision-making. Furthermore, the judge concluded, the court is issuing a restraining order prohibiting Patricia Garrett from any contact with the minor child pending resolution of the CPS investigation. The criminal justice system moved with surprising efficiency once adult protective services and law enforcement became involved. My mother faced charges for elder financial abuse, theft by deception, and interference with child custody. The district attorney explained that financial abuse of elderly relatives was a priority prosecution area, especially when combined with other manipulative behaviors. Derek's law firm faced ethical review by the State Bar Association for their role in the false custody case. While Derek himself wasn't sanctioned, the firm implemented new policies about family relationship conflicts and paid a substantial fine for inadequate conflict screening. But the most meaningful justice came from unexpected sources. Stephanie's marriage began falling apart when Derek's law firm dropped all their legal matters due to ethical concerns. Derek's partners weren't interested in a junior associate whose family drama had caused professional liability issues. When Stephanie found out that Derek had been participating in a scheme to manipulate custody of his nephew, she realized she'd married someone whose judgment and character were fundamentally flawed. My grandfather moved into a small apartment just 3 blocks from our house, finally free from my mother's financial manipulation and eager to build a genuine relationship with Emma. His workshop became Emma's favorite place to visit, where she learned woodworking basics and heard stories about craftsmanship and integrity. The construction crew at Peterson Electric became Emma's extended uncles, contributing to a fund that ensured she'd have the best possible medical care and asthma management equipment. Frank instituted a company policy providing emergency family leave for any worker facing a child's medical crisis. Emma's recovery exceeded every medical expectation. Dr. Williams explained that children who feel secure and loved often show remarkable resilience after respiratory emergencies. Emma's lung function returned to baseline within 6 weeks, and her confidence grew as she understood that her medical needs would never be seen as burdens or manipulation tools. "Daddy," she said one evening while we worked on homework together, "I learned something important when I was sick." "What did you learn, sweetheart?" "I learned that real family takes care of each other when scary things happen, and fake family tries to make scary things worse." Emma had understood the lesson that took me years to learn. Family isn't defined by blood relationships but by consistent, loving actions that prioritize each other's well-being. The financial investigation revealed that my mother had stolen nearly $12,000 from my grandfather over 18 months, using fabricated stories about my needs to justify her requests. Restitution was ordered as part of her plea agreement, along with 3 years of probation and mandatory counseling for financial abuse disorders. Most importantly, Emma developed new relationships that reinforced her sense of security and worth. Dr. Williams remained her primary pulmonologist, providing continuity of care that emphasized Emma's strength rather than her limitations. Robert's daughter, Katie, who was 9 years old, became Emma's best friend and taught her that having a medical condition was just one small part of a full, interesting life. Our new normal was simpler and more peaceful than anything we'd experienced before. Weekend mornings involved pancakes and project planning with Grandpa Harold. Evening routines included checking Emma's peak flow meter and reading stories about brave children who overcome challenges. Holiday celebrations happened with our chosen family of friends and supportive relatives who understood that love is demonstrated through actions, not demands. 6 months after Emma's hospitalization, I received an unexpected call from my cousin Marcus. "Monroe, I owe you an apology. We all do. Aunt Patricia showed us text messages that made it look like you were being irresponsible about Emma's care, but now we know those were fake." When she was arrested, a lot of family secrets came out about her manipulating people and situations for years. The extended family had finally recognized the patterns of manipulation that had affected multiple relationships over decades. Several relatives reached out to apologize and to rebuild connections based on truth rather than manufactured drama. But the most profound change was in my relationship with Emma herself. The medical emergency had tested our bond under the worst possible circumstances, and we'd emerged stronger and more trusting. Emma knew with absolute certainty that I would always prioritize her well-being over social pressure, family politics, or personal convenience. Daddy, when I grow up and have my own kids, I'm going to take care of them the same way you take care of me. How's that, Emma? I'm going to stay with them when they're scared, and I'm going to tell anyone who's mean to them to go away and leave us alone. Emma had learned the most valuable lesson of all. Unconditional love requires fierce protection of the people we care about, even when that protection comes at personal cost. The life lesson that emerged from our ordeal was both simple and profound. True family loyalty means supporting each other through genuine crises, not demanding that genuine crises be abandoned for social conveniences. When people use your worst moments as ammunition against you, they've revealed that they were never your family to begin with. Emma and I built a new definition of family based on presence during difficulty, celebration of recovery, and unwavering commitment to each other's authentic well-being. We learned that the people who matter most are the ones who show up when showing up is difficult, who protect your peace when others try to disturb it, and who love you not, despite your challenges, but including them. Our story isn't about cutting off blood relatives or rejecting family altogether. It's about recognizing that family bonds are earned through consistent, loving behavior, and that protecting our children from toxic manipulation is one of the most important responsibilities we have as parents. Emma is now 10 years old, confident in managing her asthma, and surrounded by people who see her medical needs as just one part of a complete, beloved person. She knows that her worth isn't measured by her convenience to others, and that the people who love her will always prioritize her safety and happiness above social expectations. What challenges have you faced when family members prioritize their own comfort over your child's genuine needs? How did you navigate the difficult choice between family loyalty and protecting your children? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like this video to help other parents who might be facing similar situations. Subscribe for more real-life stories about protecting family bonds and standing up for what matters most. And share this with anyone who needs encouragement to trust their parental instincts over family pressure. Thank you for listening to our story, and remember, the people who love you will support your hardest moments, not use them against you. Trust your heart when it comes to protecting the people who depend on you most.